Hello everyone, welcome to the next review. Today's review is going to be for Andrew Doyle's The New Puritans. This was a challenging read, admittedly, not because it's particularly laden with theoretical jargon. In fact, it actively tries to avoid that approach. Essentially, I found this a challenging read in the sense that this book has many case studies for issues that I have begun to struggle with over the past several years. This is a book fundamentally about liberalism. It's about the authoritarianism at the core of what Andrew Doyle calls critical social justice, taking his cue from a book by, I believe it was James Lindsay and Helen Pluckrose, their book Cynical Theories. This is really a kind of a development upon that. It's very much a well-researched document. There are many case studies in this book, and that's actually it's a joy to see such thought gone into this argument against wokeism, or more accurately, critical social justice. But again, at the same time, the wealth of case studies really kind of puts a downer on your day when you have to read constantly about illiberal practices in society and culture and institutions. Before I begin with the book itself, I just want to point out that Andrew Doyle has always really been a favourite of mine in that sphere of commentators and thinkers that critique wokeism, critical social justice. Andrew Doyle, I suppose he's one of the thinkers that is less strident, to me at least. He's less strident. He has a calmer and more reasoned outlook and approach. He is so very fundamentally against critical social justice, and yet he would seem to come from a background that would promote such ideas. He is not that background necessarily always matters, which is actually something that the intersectionalists would think. That identity is what everything comes down to. But Andrew Doyle, he's gay, he calls himself a classical liberal, I believe, and yet people would tar him as someone that is on the alt-right, even a far right, a member of the far right. Definitely not. This is a man who is writing about, again, the deleterious effects of liberalism, critical social justice. And also, I just have to mention that the reason this book is so well researched is that Doyle has a background in literary critique. He was very much situated in the postmodern theoretical world in which this book actually critiques. I believe he did his PhD thesis on gender relations in Renaissance literature, I believe it was, but essentially he comes from an academic background, and that is why this book is so thoroughly well researched. And also, I just have to mention that I recently discovered that Andrew Doyle is also a very great fan of Mervyn Peake's work, so that's also a plus. I think it's important to just give an understanding of the types of ideas that Doyle is critiquing in this book. He says, for the sake of clarity, he's going to outline some of the key tenets and belief systems that kind of undergird the critical social justice movement or way of thinking. Censorship. First and foremost, wokeness is a belief system underpinned by the postmodern notion that our understanding of reality is construed through language. Its adherents are convinced that words can be a form of violence, and that censorship, either by the state or Silicon Valley tech giants, or societal pressure, colloquially known as cancel culture, is therefore necessary to guarantee social justice. Power. The woke maintain that society operates on the basis of invisible power structures that only those who are trained in critical theory are qualified to detect. This conceptualization is derived from Foucault, who saw power as produced by discourses that permeate all society in all directions, and not solely as a top-down phenomenon. Power is everywhere, he writes, not because it embraces everything, but because it comes from everywhere. That's Foucault, I should clarify. Denials of such structures are taken as further evidence of their existence, as anyone who would deny them is likely to be benefiting from the privileges they afford. Society must be reconstructed in order to guarantee equality of outcome, rather than equality of opportunity. In other words, we are talking here about equity rather than equality. Identity politics. Now, some of you might be aware that I recently did a video on this very topic, venting my frustrations about the focus on identity, and this book goes heavily into those subjects. Identity politics. The woke, in inverted commas, see people in terms of their group identity rather than their individual qualities. Race, gender, and sexuality, as opposed to class or economic disparities, are taken to be the determining factors when it comes to mapping the power structures that undergird society. This is why intersectionality plays such a significant role within the discourse of critical social justice. Lastly, lived experience. One of the key factors of Enlightenment thinking is the prioritization of evidence-based epistemology, rather than that which is grounded in faith, superstition, or intuition. This is rejected by the woke in favour of lived experience, which proposes that there are multiple ways of knowing and prioritises individual truths. Andrew Doyle then goes on to talk about intersectionality, which of course we know as, it's almost to make myself more sacralized in a way if I am perceived as being in a category that is oppressed, but also in another category that is oppressed, and these all kind of converge, they intersect, I suppose. I feel a lot of sympathy with Andrew Doyle, in that this book is very much, again, pointing toward that middle ground of taking from both sides, and that is, I believe, I almost struggle to see how anyone couldn't have that view. I could say this book stretches all the way from the Salem witch trials to modern cancellations of comedy venues, for example. There's so much in here, and in between there's so much intellectual and rigorous argumentation. I cannot recommend this book highly enough, even if I do have some misgivings about certain things that Doyle says. The New Puritans, how the religion of social justice captured the Western world. Thanks for watching, everyone. Till next time.